We are in that glorious time. The initial hate cycle of the Nintendo Switch 2, the narrative that Mario Kart World would fail and that the console would not do well and that Nintendo would go third party has completely collapsed. And now we're seeing like the early stages of phase 2 in which the Pretendo community has to rally and try to find something new to complain about. Last month they complained about the Close to You Pikmin short for confirming the existence of humans in the Pikmin setting. They complained about Pokemon Legends EA. They complained about Hyrule Warriors. They complained about Kirby Air Riders. And now they're complaining about Metroid Prime 4. All the while hyping up Valve's discount Temu Edition GameCube. Okay, it is embarrassing to see what the gaming community is up to over these past several months, because we have had like gargantuan hit after gargantuan hit. Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Mario like Mario Party Jamboree Switch 2 edition. We have Kirby Air Riders, we have Hyrule Warriors, Metroid Prime 4, all of which is clearly shaping up to be very, very successful and popular. And yet, the narrative has always been consistently just no. Nintendo can't be allowed to succeed. We have to downplay everything we do, and we have to be angry, irrationally so, about every single one of their announcements. I'm seeing guys getting upset that Rosalina is voiced by Brie Larson. Okay, like who cares? Like who cares about the actors? I'm seeing people complaining about Metroid Prime 4 having NPCs. Like Metroid has never had NPC companion characters. The Pretendos cry when like actual fans are pointing to games like Metroid Prime 3, like Metroid Prime 2, like Federation Force, like the Metroid 2 and Super Metroid, Dread, Fusion. NPCs have been a thing in Metroid since NPCs became a thing. Okay, like the entire fan fiction alternate reality that like, oh, Metroid's entirely about being completely alone and having no dialogue, like that was never true. Like even the original had like the text scroll in the manual. Like what are you talking about? They're like, oh, if Samus isn't completely alone, like like come on, it's just reaching at this point. And that's kind of how I feel like sitting and looking at what these people are like crying about and what they're saying is that like they are reaching for something to complain about. Because Prime 4, going by like the new gameplay footage, looks fine. There's nothing wrong with it. The NPCs are perfectly natural and were built up through Federation Force, which is something that a lot of these people aren't really acknowledging. Like, we have known the series was going to go in this direction since Metroid Prime 3. Okay, like there's nothing weird about it. There's nothing wrong. It's just a giant cope on behalf of the fanboys and just the pretendos. It's just like they are just looking for anything to complain about. And it really needs to be said that they are more angry about Metroid Prime 4 than they were about, say, The Last of Us Part 2 or God of War Ragnarok or like any of these other like Ghost of Your Toy, right? It has nothing to do with like the character or like the Metroid IP. Like it's just because it's a Nintendo game and has to be massively downplayed no matter what. And upon looking at who was responsible for complaining about this character and what was going on with it, like I uncovered a ton of game journos. People who are doing everything they possibly can to bury this game before it comes out. I've said this before, but it is essential for the gaming community to like continue to downplay Metroid games, because if it ever became understood that like games like, say, Metroid Prime 3 were better than Dead Space, were better than Mass Effect, were better than like Halo, really, like their grift would just not survive. So like they have to do this thing where they have to like do things like, oh, Metroid isn't a very good FPS. Like, hey, genius, it's not an FPS. It's a first-person adventure. You're looking through the visor, through Samus's helmet, but it's not necessarily about shooting things necessarily the same way that like GoldenEye is, right? Like, you have a gun, but that doesn't mean the game revolves around shooting things. It is a first-person adventure. It's a completely different thing. Way better than Half-Life. You know, everyone knows this. Like, Halo doesn't have, Metroid doesn't have any multiplayer features. Like, yeah. So, like, the single player is better than anything Halo has ever produced. I survived that era where, like, people were screaming at you about Halo was this, like, cultural phenomenon. One of the greatest, most recognized gaming IPs in the world, and how Metroid couldn't compete, and how the GameCube was a joke. And what happened? Metroid Prime is still a beloved classic that's played to this day. It was re-released recently, sold another million units, like, was a huge deal, huge success. And meanwhile, Halo is completely obscure. It is forgotten. And, like, I have guys on TikTok, like, trying to correct me on that. Like, well, if Microsoft, Bungie, and Microsoft and Bungie and 343 didn't drop the ball, Halo would be bigger than ever. Like, no. Halo was falling off before the third game even came out. Even when Halo 2 came out, people were talking about how terrible that ending was. They completely scrapped the final level, and you never got a conclusion to what was supposed to be the greatest game ever made. I remember when people were hyping up Halo 2 as one of the all-time greats. And looking back on it, I don't even think this game makes top 10 lists. Like, I don't even think it makes top 100 lists. Like, who do you know who remembers Halo 2 today? Nobody. Like, Halo is just something that was hyped up by by millennials who had never played an FPS game before. And as such, we're not aware of the far superior, like, Turok games, GoldenEye, Metroid Prime on Nintendo consoles. That is and always has been the Xbox audience, is people who just aren't aware of just how much better Nintendo games actually are. And that's kind of what we're seeing here with Metroid Prime 4, is that people are saying all this stuff that, like, it's like the MCU, it's cringe, it's going to be just as bad as what these other companies do. And that's just so transparently not true. It's honestly kind of laughable. At this stage, people, like, I was very skeptical of Metroid Prime 4 going into this because I felt like they didn't show enough gameplay. I've kind of flipped on it at this point. Like, I've seen enough at this point where it feels like another Tears of the Kingdom situation in which Nintendo is deliberately not telling you everything about the game to keep people, like, in the dark, and they'll be surprised by it when they actually play the game. That's kind of my mindset going into this. Tears of the Kingdom is one of my all-time favorite games now, and a lot of people are seething about it. A lot of people are very, very upset that Tears of the Kingdom was as popular as it was, because the narrative initially was that Tears of the Kingdom failed and that nobody cares about it and it was some huge disappointment, and that in reality, it's like now some beloved classic. It's too early to say if the same thing is going to happen to Metroid Prime 4, but we do need to, like, acknowledge, like, the pattern recognition here is that no matter what happens, a certain segment of the community online is going to spurg. They are going to bitch. They are going to moan. They are going to whine. They are complain about something relatively innocuous. And this is a really good example of that. The entire narrative that Metroid characters don't belong in Metroid, that NPCs don't belong in Metroid, like, fell apart almost immediately. If you think about it even, like, remotely critically, it doesn't make any sense that Metroid has to be, like, the same, like, exactly how the fans imagine it. It's something that really should be called out and addressed. I have a very big problem with how the Metroid fan base have been conducting themselves lately.